Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome um, a fellow alumni from my business school, the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, an expert in the entertainment business from Mumbai, India, Mr. Karan Taurani. Karan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ashutosh. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you. Karan is the Senior Vice President of Elara Capital. He has just been rated the number one media entertainment analyst as per Asia Money Brokers poll. He's an expert in the movie and the entertainment industry. So, Karan, let's start talking about the movie and the entertainment industry. What got you interested in this business?
So I think, when I started off my career, it was all about stock markets and finance. That was my fascination for
Mhm.
the start. And I started off as a research analyst at a very early age of, 20, just after graduation.
Hmm.
And post that, I started looking at the tech sector and, I just thought that, I should look at something more glamorous. And
Mhm.
generally, my family background has also been in the film business. My
Mhm.
uncles, my fathers, they've somehow been associated with the entertainment industry.
Okay.
So I thought, might as well, why not try this thing out? And anyways, I used to like tracking media trends, since I was a child, right
Hmm.
from films, everything put together. So
Hmm.
I think it just worked well wherein I got an opportunity to really start tracking the media sector.
Hmm.
And now it's become like a passion. I mean, there's no looking back right now. So it's
That's
more than work. It's something that I really love to do.
amazing. And it's often said that India produces more films across multiple languages than all the world put together. How many films do we produce in India?
I think India, we produce close to 1,600 films. These are feature films that I'm talking about.
Mhm.
I think a large portion of the films are produced in regional. So if you look at the numbers here, out of 1,600, only about 300 would be Hindi films.
Right.
About 150, 200 would be Hollywood films, and the largely other part would be the regional films. And
Amazing.
even in regional too, South is a really big market. If you look at Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada, these are really big markets, and a large number of films are produced in those languages.
Fascinating. And would you happen to know how large is the industry in terms of crores or billions of dollars?
So I think the industry size today, if you look at it, is about 20 or 1,000 crores. I'm talking about purely pre-pandemic numbers because right now the exhibition
Yeah. Yeah.
business was largely shut, and
Mhm.
it's kind of uncertain situation right now. But 20,000 crores is the industry size. Out of this, close to 60% is theatrical, and the balance 40% is split across overseas theatrical, and is split across digital rights and satellite rights. Now, this 60% domestic theatricals as a number was close to 75 to 80% until 10 years back.
Mhm.
What has happened now in the last 10 years is that a lot of things have changed. Producers are being paid big amount of money for satellite rights, for digital rights,
Mhm.
and theatrical as a business is not growing more than about 8 to 10 odd percent. And the other streams of businesses, which is overseas somewhat, and digital rights, satellite, that's probably growing at a pace of 20% plus, which is why this displacement is happening. But as it's always being said, I'm a firm believer of this. That cinema is here to stay. I mean, despite whatever numbers coming down, cinema has a lion share. And for every producer, if it is a large scale film or if it's a medium budget film, it is very important for the films to go on cinemas because even today, 60% of the revenue on an average, comes from domestic theatricals.
Very interesting. So, Karan, you just mentioned that your family has been in, and they're big names. I mean, the Taurani name is a big name in the industry. I'd love to get your perspective on how have you and your family seen the industry changing over the decades?
So I think it's changed a lot. I was also associated with my father's business, which was on the physical side. We used to have a lot of physical audio being sold and physical software.
Hmm.
And my father and my uncles were in the same business. Then my uncle, went on to become producers, and my father was on the retail side. So I've been associated with the entire ecosystem together. A
Hmm.
lot of changes happening. First big transition that we've seen is the shift to digital. I think that is something which is completely unavoidable right now. Every business stream is right now moving to digital in a very big way.
Hmm.
In fact, if we look at the numbers, I think if I'm talking about the movie revenue cycle, Physical revenue was close to 15-20%. I'm talking about 20 years back. And right now, it's not even 1% of the revenue. So there's been a big shift in terms of content consumption. I think audience has really transitioned right from physical to TV to now digital. And we don't know what technology holds from here on going ahead. But yeah, there has been a rapid transition in terms of the consumption patterns.
Very interesting. And before we go further, for our viewers and listeners, tell us some of the big movies your uncle has done.
So in terms of big movies, I think there have been multiple movies that he's done. He's done Ajab Prem Gazab Kahani. He's done things like Soldier, Dil Hai Tumhara. He's done Race franchise, which is there. So there are multiple films, that he has been associated.
All big, very, very big movies.
Yes.
Terrific. Thank you. That was just to give a little perspective to our viewers and listeners. But the other question that I have is that everything is becoming digital. How is digital technology changing the movie industry?
I think digital technology, again, is a very important aspect. I think you have to really give that kind of content. So it's all a chicken and egg story right now. So basically, if I have got a 3D and 4D technology in my cinema or in my property, it really does not make any kind of sense, because if the producers are not making that kind of content, there's no use of having that kind of technology. So what is happening right now is that producers are slowly realizing that people really want to watch films which are larger than life in nature. They just don't want to watch run-the-mill content. They are spending money on food. They are spending money on ticket. It's quite a hefty money what they're spending in terms of ticket prices as well. So if they want to enjoy the experience, of this entire thing, which is there, right from sound projection to technology, which is there. So I think a lot of films that are now being made are available in 3D, 4DX. I think, we are going to, come across to a situation wherein we'll probably come on par with Hollywood someday, of the superhero, super franchise. We've seen what happened with Suryavanshi, is now coming like a franchise. We've seen what happens with the other franchise films which are there, Golmaal and all put together. People would love to watch these kind of films in 3D, animation effects and all. So I think technology is very, very important. You have to innovate a lot. And I think cinemas are doing that on the right path. So if you look at what they've done in terms of recliners, streaming offerings, 3D screens, IMAX screens, I think it's only growing. So currently, as we speak, close to 20% of the cinema chains screens, in terms of whatever new screens they add, 20% of the screens are premium screen, IMAX screens. So I think the intent is very clear, that they really want to move towards premiumization. And the audience will also come in large numbers, provided there's a supply of content of that nature.
Amazing, amazing. And in the last few years, the whole industry seems to have been turned over on its head with all the OTT platforms. And yet there are the big budget movies which are still holding out and only going to the movie theaters. How are OTT platforms beginning to change the way the industry is functioning?
So I think, this is more of an opportunity for the OTT platforms, because, pre-pandemic, there was too much pride, too much spoken about, OTT can displace theaters and stuff like that. But somehow, producers never got a chance to go direct OTT. They somehow refrained from doing that. But the pandemic gave them a chance, because they had no choice, because a lot of capital was getting stuck, a lot of interest costs was going high, the cost of film was increasing. So they did go to OTT. Some of them also waited, on the other hand. It was not that all films went for the OTT route. But definitely, I think there are learnings here. So first learning is that, whatever films that have gone on OTT have somehow not clicked or not done well, except for a few medium budget films. I think this clearly goes to show that, large budget film economics are not suitable for OTT. So I think one trend here, if you see, a theatrical release like a War that came out, pre-pandemic in cinemas versus a film like a Bhuj, the kind of ROIs, Bhuj, which came direct to the OTT route on Disney Plus, the kind of ROIs these films would have made, there's a huge difference. Like, for example, a film like a War would have made an ROI of 60% plus on the entire film as a content product. Whereas a film like a Bhuj would have made ROIs which are less than half of what a War would have made. So I think economics are very favorable as far as cinema is concerned. That's the first point that I shared. 60% of your revenue today also comes from domestic theatrical, which one producer cannot ignore. And I think this trend will basically continue, that you may find some films here and there going on direct OTT release. But my sense again here is that OTTs are not going to keep on spending hefty amount of money on film content, because I think their core focus area would be customer subscription, customer retention, which may not come from hero content. So film is like hero content in nature. So I think they will basically go and invest heavy amount of money and spend a lot of time and effort on web series, because web series has a franchise value, has a recall value. Your customer is sticky in nature. The customer is kind of looking forward to the next series or the next season of that particular web series which is there. So I think that's a very important aspect of it, and OTTs will kind of somehow move away from films, as a content strategy over a period of time.
Interesting. So my next question to you, Karan, is what are the future growth drivers and opportunities for us in India versus the developed nations?
So I think India, there's a huge opportunity in terms of the film industry and the cinema industry. Now, I'll just come to the cinema industry first. So if you look at the number of screens, if you look at the absolute number of screens, we've got about 9,500 screens only. And if you look at this number about 5 to 10 years back, we were at almost 12,000 screens. So what has happened is that the number of screens have come down significantly because single screens are consistently shutting down. Almost 300 to 400 single screens shutting down every year. It is only multiplexes which are adding screens, which is not good enough to offset this negative impact of this. So typically, in terms of number of absolute screens, in terms of screen penetration, we are only about 9 screens per million population. Now look at the math there in terms of markets like China and US. How they've come ahead. US, for example, has got about 70,000 screens. China has got about 65, 70,000 screens as well. So I think they are very large in terms of market. And if you look at from a population standpoint or from a penetration standpoint, they're at about, China is about 20 screens per million population. US is about 120 screens per million population. So I think we are very low, in terms of screen penetration. And we really need to expand there in terms of audience. The second question, what was you asked?
And, what is the opportunity as compared to developed nations?
Yeah, so I think opportunity here is multifold. I think as I told you, we have got a large plethora of content, almost 1,600 films that are there. India as a market in terms of content has also somewhere lagged. So if you look at the US market for that matter, a large film which is released in a Hollywood studio, only 30% of the revenue comes from US, 70% comes from non-US market. Now in India, that is completely different. So India, for example, if whenever a film is released, only 10% of the revenue comes from non-India markets. 90% comes from the India market. So I think we really need to move ahead in that way, wherein a lot of revenue will also come from the non-India market. For now, we've seen only Dangal and some couple of other films of Amir Khan, which have been a huge success in China. And if you look at the numbers there, I think then it will match up to the Hollywood studio numbers where 30-40% has come from India and the rest from non-India. I think more of such films need to be made. Wherein we can probably monetize our content better in terms of overseas. So I think that is where we have lagged. But yeah, over a period of time, as creativity steps up, as the kind of budget films that we make, as the kind of, the script writing improves, basically, I think we will also somewhat get.
Interesting. My next question, you just mentioned a few minutes ago that about 300-400 single screen cinemas are shutting down every year. And the total number of screens we have is about 9,000. How are multiplexes affecting the business of the single cinemas?
So I think multiplexes definitely are the ones, who are taking this entire load of growth because single screens clearly are not growing. And I think they are doing phenomenally well because what we are seeing also in a country like India is, in terms of purchasing power, which is there. The audience moving towards premiumization. We've seen that across all consumer discretionary sector. The audience wants to move towards premiumization. It's a very slow and gradual and a painful process, but definitely the structural trend is here to stay despite uncertainties around COVID or, other things which happened before COVID. Now, the thing here is that, it is a very interesting trend which is there. We are heading towards a big amount of consolidation. Now, if you look at the numbers here, the multiplexes earlier accounted for close to 40-50% of the box office share for a Hindi film. This is number about 5 to 8 years back. As on today, they are accounting for close to 70-75% of the box office. So I think the relevance, the importance, of the multiplexes in the entire ecosystem is here to stay. And I think this is twofold. One is, of course, because they are expanding more heavily. People are going to multiplexes in larger numbers. And second is the ticket prices. So if you look at the average ticket prices pure play, I think multiplexes are close to 3x of what an average single screen ticket price would be. So I think producers also have realized the importance of multiplex, and they've realized that, if things have to move to premiumization, higher ticket prices, it will eventually lead to better box office numbers for the films and better monetization. So I think that is definitely the path from here on going.
Amazing. So, Karan, let's talk a little bit about OTT, which seems to be the rage, not just in India, but all over the world. I was reading an article where they say that there are these four big guys, and then there are dozens of smaller players. But the market is very fragmented. Everyone has a different pricing plan, from 199 rupees per year to Netflix, which is 500-600 a month. What is the path ahead? What do you see happening?
I think OTT definitely is a very highly fragmented market, but you have to give it to a country like India. We've got multiple languages. Apart from Hindi, English, there are some 12 to 15 large regional languages which are there. So I think the fragmentation had to be there in a country like India because there is too much to consume. There is too much variety that the customer exactly wants, and we have still not penetrated. I mean. We still have scope for adding maybe 20 more OTTs, which are focused on regional. And suddenly, out of the blue, we've seen OTTs like AHA, which is the regional OTT, OTTs like Hoichoi, which is the Bengali OTT, come and make huge success. So I think the variety of audience is very huge. And I think as far as this market is concerned, I think we are very far away from consolidation. There will be different types of OTTs that will exist. So I think for an OTT, there's a secret sauce. So one is of course content. You have to make the right content, and the content has to click well with the audience. But I think apart from content, there are two things which are key here. I think one is distribution, basically getting to the end mile to the customer. That is very, very important. Rather than relying on third-party aggregators, rather than relying on telcos, rather than relying on minimum guarantees, I think getting to your customer on your own, building a brand recall, I think that is very, very important. That will only come basically the kind of content that you make. I think the second big mantra here is in terms of user experience. So I think OTT platform, needs to have a very good tech, very good user experience, for the customers to want to use it and basically looking forward to use that kind of a platform. So I think if you look at the OTT industry, the growth is going to be towards 30-40%. It's going to be twofold. One is, of course, the inorganic growth because of number of new OTTs coming. And second is, of course, because of penetration stories. The existing OTT platforms will grow in terms of AVOD revenue and also in terms of SVOD revenue. So advertising revenue is growing at close to 40%, subscription revenue is growing at close to 50%. So overall OTT industry is probably growing at 40% CAGR, and it's probably going to double in the next 2.5 years. Now, if you look at the content cost side as well, I don't think these OTT platforms are going to make money for the next 5 years at least, because right now the space has got a lot of competition, and once you have competition, your content costs are only going to inch up, not going to come down. So I think unless there is no consolidation, content costs will keep on increasing at a pace of 25-30% every year. I mean, just look at it this way. Web series were earlier made 5 years back. It was a very big thing that a web series is made at a budget of 60 lakh, 70 lakh per episode. Today, we're talking of web series which are made at a budget of even 2.5 crore per episode, which is not a big thing. So I think the kind of content OTT is going to make is very larger than life. And OTTs are not shying away from investing money, because nowadays web series have become such a product that they are made almost on par with, what a film is made. They've got the large star cast, the good creative directors, the extravagant sets. So I think this is only going to increase from here on. The entire spending, consumption, the growth, content costs, this is all basically here to stay for the next 3 to 5 years.
Amazing. There's also a lot of debate, Karan, on the regulation of the OTT business. There's a huge amount of censorship and control on the film business, but there seems to be nothing on OTT. I'd love to get your perspective on this.
So I'm of that school of thought that there has to be some kind of level playing field. I think at one end you've got a TV medium wherein you are not regulating it at all, right? A TV medium which is completely regulated, and OTT is completely not regulated at all, right? So there is a huge difference there. So I think there has to be some kind of change in terms of regulation. I'm not in favor of a blanket censorship, because that will again impact your creative ecosystem, the kind of content which is created on OTT, and also the audience. The audience looks forward to watching that violent content on OTT, which is not available on TV. But I think some kind of level playing field has to happen here, which is why they've got this entire self-regulation system in India, which I feel is a very good thing. Because in a country like India, what happens is that you are bounded by multiple cultures, multiple languages. So you have to be very careful in terms of not hurting anybody's sentiment. And effectively, OTT should not be a entertainment medium which is kind of impacting the society harmony, right? So
Mm.
I mean, this has happened in the past as well. Movies like Padmavat, there are other films which have been involved into controversies because of the type of content. But that's a very rare case, maybe once a year or maybe once in 18 months.
Mm.
But with something like an OTT, because there is so much of freedom in terms of creativity, there
Mm.
is always a higher probability of hurting someone's sentiment or probably not showcasing that in a proper way, that
Mm.
how someone would basically want basically in terms of their religion or culture or whatever it is.
Mm.
So I think some level playing field is there, and I think self-regulation is the only way to go ahead. And I think we'll probably monitor this for another 2 to 3 years, and then maybe we can come up with something more stricter if need be. But as of now, I think self-regulation is something which one can really be happy with, and hopefully, that should solve a large part of the problems which are there.
Very interesting. So, Karan, I have time for two more questions. My next question is that uh, big Bollywood stars are now coming to the OTT platform. Do you see this trend growing and continuing, even after the pandemic when cinema halls may open again?
Yeah, so as I told you, right now what is happening is that there is one form of content which is made for OTT, one form of content which is made for cinema. Both are going to coexist. There is nothing that they are competing with each other.
Mhm.
With OTT, you would have seen even now that there are many of these large stars, actors, actresses, who are coming on OTT in form of films or web series, which is there. So I think for an OTT, that's a very huge advantage because it gets them that that eyeball which is there. In terms they don't have to basically work too hard in terms of marketing the content or the talent or the actor.
Mm.
That's a huge advantage for them. I think this trend is here to stay and it is definitely going to continue because, as I told you, the audience is very different. Audience for cinema, when they go to the cinema theater, they go for the overall experience apart from the content and actors.
Mm.
And the audience for OTT is very different because they want to really watch that catchy youth and content which is without any kind of foundations for that matter.
Mm.
So I think this trend is there. And the second thing for this trend, very importantly, is the kind of budgets. So it's very important that OTT should keep on being willingness. OTTs, should have the willingness of spending more budgets
Mm.
on this kind of content because this content is extremely expensive in nature. So if
Mm.
they are willing to spend on web series, on films that are large franchise in nature, which I'm sure they will continue to be because, as I told you, the market is growing at 40-50% plus. So of course, they have to spend that kind of money on content to drive the new users. So I think if they are willing to spend that kind of money and budgets, I think this trend is definitely here to stay. And nowadays, actors are not of that school of thought that, because they are very big on the larger scale, they will have a brand impact on the small scale. That's not the case anymore because the kind of content they are making is very different. For example, a Ranveer Singh making something on a film, feature film versus on a web series will be very different in terms of the type of content which is there. Of course, what I believe is that films going direct OTT and not doing well is something which has a negative impact in terms of the brand value of a celebrity. But if a film is made only for the OTT with that bold content or with that violent content and with that free content which is basically free out of any foundations,
Mm.
then definitely there is no problem at all.
Amazing. So, Karan, my last question to you, and this is from your perspective as the number one media and entertainment analyst, someone who's a part of the industry, someone who follows the industry well. What is your vision for the future for the film and cinema business?
So I think these are really great times for the film and cinema business. I think for the producers, it's like a party time right now because the more content that they make, the more there are opportunities which are there in terms of monetization. So as I told you clearly, back in the day, the producers had only one window of monetization largely, which was cinema, and the others were very small in terms of size. But now, a producer can actually make content for OTT. A producer can actually make content only for cinema. A producer can make content which is larger than life, basically, which can go to the overseas market aggressively. Dubbing is a huge opportunity. So I think there are multiple opportunities here. So I think I'll just start off with cinema industry first. So one, I told you about this entire coexistence part of cinema and OTT. Cinema is here to stay as a business model. I think second trend here is consolidation. So as I told you, multiplexes are gaining market share each day because single screens are not that active into the business. So multiplex importance will actually increase in the entire ecosystem. Third thing is, of course, premiumization, which I told you about. Premiumization is a very big trend and people are not shying away from spending big amount of money. I mean, people are okay to even pay 1,000 rupees for a recliner seat, provided the experience is good and the content is good. Look at something like a Spider-Man. What exactly happened? I mean, it came out of nowhere, collected 200 crores in the pandemic in a country like India. So I think that is what we're talking about, premiumization. Then basically talking about the film industry, I think that there are multiple trends there as well. One is, I think, a studio-based concept. So I think, for the exhibition business to grow, for the content business to grow, it is very important to have a proper flow of content. And I think gone are the days where, you had small producers making, one film in 2 years. Now I think it's all studio-led business model. I think studios have got deep pockets. They can probably afford to make 10 to 12 films in a year. And the more films they make, the better the scale, the better the advantage for the customer in terms of variety of content. So I think one very big trend to watch out is the studio-based content which is there. I think the second big trend is regional dubbed content. I mean, look at something like the Pushpa, out of nowhere, again, without any marketing, did 100 crores plus kind of collection. So I think people are going to experiment different models. People are going to try out, dubbing of different films. And some of them might even surprise, which was never expected earlier. And second thing, last but not the least, is the trend around the overseas market. It's a very huge untapped opportunity. I think Indian film creators, producers, studios need to make a lot of films which are going to be, for the global appeal, because that will only do good to them than anybody else. Monetization opportunities will kind of increase for them. So I think these 5-6 trends which are there, which are very important to study for the cinema and the film industry.
Fascinating. Karan, on that note, thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me at such length about the movie industry, the entertainment industry, the cinemas, the OTTs. I mean, I have learned so many new things today. Thank you again and good luck.
Thank you very much, Ashutosh. Pleasure is all mine. It was great to be on your show. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.